그러면 발표해 주실 라메시 라오 소장님을 모시도록 하겠습니다. 라메시 라오 소장님께서는 유니버시티 오브 캘리포니아 샌디에고 캘리포니아 정보통신기술연구소 소장님으로 현재 UC 샌디에고에서 전기 및 컴퓨터공학과 교수를 겸임 중이시며 캘리포니아 과학기술위원회 펠로우 겸 선임연구원이십니다. 라메시 라오 소장님을 큰 박수로 맞이해 주시기 바랍니다.
Thank you very much for adjusting the schedule to make time for me around the other constraints. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking to you, sharing some ideas about what it might take to make smart cities a habitable city that people like to live in. Let me start by sharing with you, just very briefly, that I serve as the director of an interdisciplinary research institute at UC San Diego called the Qualcomm Institute, where our charter is to impact societal scale systems in health, energy, environment, and culture. And we are focusing on doing this through technologies, specifically nanotechnology, wireless communications, optical communications, and cyber infrastructure, distributed computing, storage, and visualization. We also have a focus on fostering innovation through the creation of new startups. We have an incubator in our institute where students, researchers are welcome to take advantage of the facilities the university offers to create new startups. This morning we heard quite a bit about participatory design. When a city like Daegu or a region, a state decides to embrace new technology, there's a growing recognition that this cannot be viewed as just a technical problem, but that it must involve the people. And it's an interesting exercise. I briefly alluded to this earlier today, but how do you actually engage people to get some ideas about the future? And artists in our environment have played a remarkable role. Professor Kyung Park, who's a professor at UC San Diego, has installation at the Asian Cultural Center, which was set up to prompt people to imagine a new Eurasia. Something terrible happens and the population of Eurasia is decimated, and now we have an opportunity to rebuild a new continent. How might you go about doing that? It sort of helps you free yourselves of the implicit constraints you might be placing on your own imagination as you think of the future. Let me switch perhaps to the other end of the spectrum and bring up something that we've been working on, which has to do with evidence-based design. We've been talking and hearing about tools and technologies that allow you to much more rapidly experiment with alternative design of buildings, hospitals, entire neighborhoods and cities. And very often the way you engage people in these exercises is to ask them how they feel when they are in a virtual reality environment that's recreating a new space for them. Like I had mentioned earlier this morning, there is plenty of research that shows that you don't quite get an honest answer when you ask people such questions. Very often, the people respond and provide an answer to you that they think you want to hear, as opposed to what they really feel. And so one of the efforts that we've been doing on evidence-based design of spaces like healthcare spaces is to actually not ask the question, but wire the person up with sensors, in this case EEG sensors, that will provide a real-time view into how their mind is responding to this new space. So there is a concrete project that we've done already on the design of a hospital where you want to be able to figure out what kinds of alignments promote healing. And healing is not an intellectual exercise, it's a physical, visceral, somatic experience. And so to be able to sense how the layout of a recovery room impacts healing directly is quite effective. We also have the ability in these VR environments to not only create immersive visual spaces, but also immersive audio spaces. And that combination takes it makes it easier for one to imagine, transport oneself into this alternative space and to be able to generate interesting feedback. So in many ways, we are going down a path where you can create instrumented spaces where you can sense all sorts of modalities. You can fuse the data that you're getting from the visual as well as physiological signals, for example, and put it all together and do some interesting machine learning on it to infer things about how an individual is facing. One concrete example that we are using to applying this methodology is in the context of looking at cognitive decline in the elderly population. Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's are fairly universal, and are there signals that one might be able to pick up in such a space that tell you in advance of a clinical presentation of the problem that an individual is perhaps suffering from something which looks like it might lead to Alzheimer's? So pathfinding, wayfinding, being able to create in virtual reality an environment with milestones. You walk a person through this environment and then you turn them around and ask them to find their way back. And you watch to see how they do that. Is their wayfinding erratic? Is it predictable? Is it getting better with time, getting worse with time? It allows you to use this virtual reality tool to understand how a human is reacting to the circumstances that confront them. These tests are expensive to do in a real-world setting, but it's much easier if you have a virtual reality environment. So, let me skip some of these slides and see if I can get to the ones that I can do justice to in the amount of time that we have left. I'm sorry. Part of what we want to be able to do with the kinds of studies that we are able to construct in a virtual reality environment is to be able to apply it in the real community. And we have the opportunity on our campus at UC San Diego to be able to create a new mixed-use facility where there will be an opportunity for elders to actually live, where there will be labs where one can test new technologies in an unobtrusive way, where there will also be opportunities to partner with a community that is interested in the commercial applications of these technologies. So we are learning that home builders and real estate developers are quite keen on constructing spaces which have these new technologies that make it easier for an aging population to live their life more fully. If you look at the demographics of what is happening around the world, it's already taken place in Japan and country parts of Europe like Italy, but even in the US, the demographics are such that you can no longer take care of the elderly using traditional family-based approaches because the population demographic is such that the number of individuals who are aging is much greater and they live much longer, and therefore technology has an important role in creating cognitive companions, in being able to provide assistive technologies. So part of what we are doing here is working with commercial applications. These sorts of partnerships have led to the creation of relationships amongst universities like UC San Diego and the city, in this case, the city of San Diego. We have a metro lab that allows for the city to share the kinds of problems and information and resources that it is well set up to share with us, and for the university with its research community, with its interest in inquiry and discovery, to be able to work together. So access to realistic data is critical to the creation of new algorithms, whether it's vision-based or for health applications, and I think this has made for a perfect partnership between the two. We've heard also about fifth generation wireless systems, and there are many aspects of 5G systems, but one of the key elements that I think is qualitatively different is the new IoT devices. So we are all familiar in this context. The industry was betting on about 50 billion new IoT devices. There's a couple of other enhancements like ultra-low latency and new spectrum. Rather than talk about the individual technology frontiers that we will have to overcome, what I want to talk about here is something that will happen once these technologies are in place. So this is a peek a little bit into the future. As we deploy lots and lots of these devices, we end up with a lot of data. And there is this general expectation that more data will produce better understanding, will produce better diagnostics, and ultimately better interventions. So if you know what is happening in your city, if you have this dashboard that tells you about which lights are on and what speeds every individual car is running at, you hope that that will allow you to manage things better, that will allow you to intervene and control things in new ways that will make life better for everybody. And this will ultimately lead to the question of causation. Okay? So as we look at data, we will begin to ask ourselves the question, what is the cause of this traffic jam? What is the cause of the stress that we are all experiencing? And we will have an implicit expectation that this large data that we get will help us understand and explain what is the cause so we can change it, right? This is going to be increasingly significant as technologies, especially 5G, creates larger and larger societal scale systems. So you're integrating many different systems, looking at a lot of data, and you're hoping that you will get an understanding. I want to take a little bit of time to tease you with this little result, with this little riddle. It has to do with causation. So when you look at a lot of data, you're going to ask, will the data tell me what is the cause of something? What statistically you can infer easily is correlation. So those of you that have a background in statistics understand this, right? When two variables go up or down together, they are correlated statistically. By now, we know that correlation does not imply causation. I teach probability for engineering students, and the classic example I use to explain this is marriage is not the cause of divorce, right? Think about it. Everybody that got divorced got married before they got divorced. So if you want to look at the correlation between marriage and divorce, it's perfectly correlated. But we would all laugh at the suggestion that marriage is the cause of divorce, right? So we have learned to separate correlation from causation. But so here is the riddle. Is the lack of correlation, does that imply absence of causation? Okay? So double negatives there, so let's look at an example. Think of this auditorium. We have thermostats in this auditorium to control the temperature. Let's say the internal temperature has been set to 20 degrees centigrade, right? I is the internal temperature. It's a constant. We have a perfect air conditioning system. It's very effective. It keeps the temperature precisely at 20 degrees centigrade, right? Now, let's say the outside temperature is whatever it is, the variable O, and we are either using gas or electricity to heat. Let's say we are using gas to heat this place to keep it comfortable. So there are three variables, I, O, and G. If I is a constant, it is completely uncorrelated with O and G, right? However, if you want to save money, changing the temperature on the thermostat is causal to the cost of heating this place. You would agree. So here is a variable which is not correlated with the cost, and yet it is causal. That is the variable that you have to turn. So the human body, for example, is a regulated system. And what this result is suggesting is that the cause of a condition like high blood pressure maybe something that is not correlated with it. This is a somewhat startling thing if you reflect on it. As we look at larger and larger data sets, I think there will be spurious results. We will come to false conclusions on what might be the cause of things that we are confronting. And as cities get smarter, the people who look at the data coming from smart cities have to also get smarter. We cannot be thinking the way we currently think and hope that we will be able to swim through this new data that's going to be hitting us. So I think there's a call for all of us to get a better understanding of what our ultimate objective is. It's never just to look at more numbers, never just to visualize things. It's always to change things. And changing things are different from just observing things. And we need a deeper understanding of the underlying dynamics, the underlying connections that make these things happen. So let me stop there. Thank you very much.
네, 발표하신 라오 소장님 감사드립니다.